By the 3rd century, the Roman occupation of Britain, a Romanised family lived and worked here at Rockbourne, in modern-day Hampshire. The ruins and mosaics this family have left behind form part of the evidence we have of their lives and how they fit into society of the time. However, these ruins raise far more questions than they answer. For example, how the Romans introduced their culture to ancient Hampshire. What sort of changes had this Romanised family experienced throughout the Roman occupation? Thirdly, how they benefited from the empire so they could afford to live in such luxury, such as at this villa. To try and answer these questions, this documentary follows the possible storyline of one Romano-British family from the Hampshire area. They came to terms with the process of Romanisation, the 400 years of Roman influence in Britain. We'll also see how the broader changes in the empire of the time would have affected the day-to-day life choices of these people, and what sort of evidence each of them left behind.
The Roman occupation of Britain began with the invasion by Emperor Claudius in AD 43. However, for nearly 100 years before, since Julius Caesar's occupation of Gaul, the Britons have been developing trade and political links with the Roman Empire.
Some of the chieftains there in Britain, having gained the friendship of Caesar Augustus through embassies and paying court to him, have set up votive offerings in the capital and have almost made the whole island Roman property.
Some British tribes, particularly on the southern coast, have begun to mint their own coinage with the names of their tribal kings written in Latin, such as this coin of Verica, a king of the Atrebates, a Hampshire tribe. They also began to build large towns influenced by Mediterranean urban planning, such as those revealed by excavations at Silchester. Straight roads and organised houses replaced the more natural curves of traditional British settlements. However, contrary to Strabo's statement, this collision of Roman and British cultures was not always peaceful. Several invasions had been planned after Caesar to take direct control of the natural resources found in Britain. Minerals such as gold in the Welsh mountains, lead from the Mendips, tin from Cornwall, copper from northern Wales, as well as a diverse agricultural economy.
It produces grain and cattle, gold, silver and iron. These are exported along with hides and slaves and hunting dogs.
So, shortly before the year AD 43, Claudius was given the political excuse to invade, as several Roman allies and trade partners on the southern coast of Britain were attacked by a rival tribe, the Catavalorni, a powerful tribe from north of the River Thames. The allies included the Regni, a tribe present in eastern Hampshire.
A certain Verica, who had been driven out of the island as a result of an uprising, had persuaded Claudius to send a force there.
The invasion took place in the summer of AD 43, when over 15% of the total fighting force of the Roman army landed in Kent, with at least 3 legions, each of 4,800 legionaries. However, despite Roman influence in preceding years, many Britons such as the Durotriges, who lived on the western borders of Hampshire, still maintained traditional hill forts. We will now join George on Danebury Hill Fort, where he has arranged a meeting with 2 legionaries.
Here I am today at Danebury Hill Fort, a prime example of an Iron Age fortification. As you can see behind me, it has a commanding view of the local area, and up ahead is the gatehouse to the fort itself. At this gatehouse, I will be interviewing 2 legionaries of the Legio II Augusta, who swept through this area of Hampshire in the invasion of 43 AD. So without further ado, let's head on to the fort. Here I am on top of Danebury Hill Fort, as you can tell by the earthworks around us. I'm also with the 2 aforementioned members of the Legion II Augusta. These are Julius Valens and Lucius Hipponicus. Sorry there. Now, gentlemen, how about you tell us what you've been doing so far in the invasion of 43 AD?
Well, to start with, we landed at Kent with Vespasian, and then we marched up the Thames Valley and we engaged the Catavalorni at Medway and defeated them quite heavily. And since then, we've been sweeping west along the south coast, securing key ports and fortresses for Coggy Douglas.
And sorry, for the viewers at home, who is Coggy Douglas?
Coggy Douglas is the local tribal king of these lands, and he was deposed by another tribal lord. So Claudius sent us in to basically sort the situation out and make sure his lands get returned to him.
Yeah.
And also, we're just in the area. The tribes are quite friendly. They've been trading with the Romans for a few decades. We had to install that trade. Also make sure that the neighbouring tribes that they've got a problem with are sorted with.
Okay, so who are these other tribes then, the ones causing trouble? And if this area, if Hampshire is peaceful, how long do you think you'll be here?
Well, to the west we've got the Durotriges tribe, and they've got a lot more hill forts than the Atrebates in this region, and they have a lot bigger ones than Danebury, which we're at the moment. There's about 30 of them, and we've got to move west in the coming months and assault those, so we're not particularly looking forward to that, but it's got to be done.
Up north, past the Thames, there's the Catavalorni still, but since we dealt with them at the Battle of Medway, that's another Legion's problem. We've got, got to move west now.
I see. And so, what are your roles in this region then? And what sort of? I see you've got quite a bit of equipment.
Well, we're just here today to make sure that the locals know we're here, and that they don't come and refortify this abandoned town. So basically, make sure we don't get any more trouble. But no, also we've been around the local area, taking away they're disarming their more dangerous weapons, and also making sure they know who to pay taxes to now.
Yeah. I mean, our role within the Legion is, as you can see, we're quite heavily armoured. We are the shock troops of the Legion, and we get sent in to clean out fortresses like this. So we'll be in the vanguard of the assaults on the Drotchgate fortresses. It's the auxiliaries who do a lot of this sort of patrolling and the dirty work, and we get the more fun jobs, really.
Yeah, I see. Definitely, you are both very heavily armed to the teeth. You have lots of little bits. So, do bits come off? Do you leave a lot of traces when you pass through an area? I mean, for future archaeologists and stuff, is there a lot of this sort of thing?
We're still staying in our winter camps, so they're pretty heavily fortified. You'll tend to find where towns build up around those. So, for example, they've got similar ramparts to this, but inside is organised barracks, hospital, and a command building. So no, but then when we're on the move, we tend to only dig temporary camps, which we then fill in the night afterwards, so you won't find much evidence of that.
I mean, like on a personal level as well, like hobnails are coming out of our boots all the time, bits and buckles fall off of our belts and things like that. This segmentator on the inside is a lot of hinges. Probably lost a hinge for every stop we've made since Medway to here, to be honest. It's a real pain.
Oh, and then we leave our impact on the local economy. It's known as military change. You see these helmets. Occasionally an unliked comrade's piece of equipment will go missing. Punch, we'll make some coinage out of it. And although our commanding officers are going to say this.
Definitely won't.
Moving away from that, as there's quite a lot of men in our legion, there's about 4,000 of us, and it means there's quite a large influx of coin into the local region, so all of the legionaries get paid quite a lot of money. So around that you'll see small towns and settlements pop up around our winter quarters to try and take advantage of all the money that we're spending in the local areas.
Definitely, I suppose I have to pay quite a bit to get you to come here willingly.
That's true, yeah. Well.
Anyway, that's extraordinary, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Good luck for the rest of the day patrolling, and I hope you have a good time in the west against those barbarians.
After the Legio II Augusta secured what is modern-day Hampshire, the frontier steadily moved to the west with the legions, to their long-term base in Exeter in around AD 54. The legions built roads ensuring a steady flow of supplies from the coastline to their inland forts. Within Hampshire, the beginnings of Romanised towns started to form, building upon the Iron Age operative towns that were already present at Silchester and Winchester. The adoption of a Roman lifestyle took time for the majority of the Britons, who still continued the rural life of their ancestors, living on farms and small villages. The process of Romanisation received a serious setback in AD 60 when the Romans annexed a client tribe, the Iceni, on the king Prasutagus' death. The queen of this tribe, Boudica, rebelled. Her rebellion against the empire led to the Iceni and allied tribes ravaging their lands around London and burning down 3 newly built Roman cities. The bronze statue head, likely Claudius found in Suffolk, may well have been decapitated as plundered during the uprising. From excavations at Silchester, we can see a burnt layer, indicating a large fire in the early life of the town. It is possible that this fire may have been a result of the Iceni burning down the Roman settlement at Silchester, indicating that some of this upheaval reached as far south as Hampshire. However, before the year had ended, the rebellion was defeated, and where the Iceni were cut off from the benefits of Roman rule, the lord tribes around Hampshire were rewarded for their continued allegiance to Rome. To see how this was achieved, George has arranged a meeting with the first member of our Romano-British family, Natalinus of the Badini, who is living on a small farm near modern-day Andover in Hampshire.
Hello, and here I am today for another interview with Natalinus. I'm outside of his Iron Age roundhouse right now, so without further ado, let's go on in and meet him and begin the interview. So here I am in Natalinus' roundhouse with the man himself. Hello, Natalinus. And without further ado, let's get into the questions. What are your experiences of the Roman invasion?
Well, I wasn't born until after the invasion had happened, but my father remembers it. Supposedly some of my uncles got involved in the fighting and haven't been seen or heard from since. They're either out west or dead.
Well, that sounds terrible. How else has Roman influence affected the area?
Well, for one, I'm glad that the Romans have brought peace to the area. I'm not fooled by this King Conny Douglas. It's clear where the power really lies. They've given him an army, they collect tax from him, and I even hear they've built him a palace to live in now that he's getting old. But there are still disadvantages. People around here are embittered that their tribal lands are being split up and given to Cocky Douglas. My tribe was always a rival with his, so for them to see their land being split up and given to him, I think it hurts their pride. Still, the Romans have cleared up the petty tribal infighting around here, so I've got a bigger, safer trade network to sell my ironworking goods than I ever had before. I can't judge their methods.
Well, that sounds good then. So they have had an effect overall, but how about the day-to-day? Has there been much change?
Well, I received my supplies a lot faster because of this new road network of theirs, but I think I'm being underpaid. The military chooses who I sell to and how much for, so for the time being at least, though I make some money, I'm mostly restricted to local trade. But the food. Last time I was in Kaliva to trade my goods, I made more money than I'd ever seen in my life, but I'll be damned if they haven't doubled the amount of things I have to spend it on.
So it sounds like these new Roman towns, these trading towns, are quite good. They're a benefit. Would you consider moving to one?
My ancestors have lived on this land for generations, and our gods have blessed it to be good and fertile, so if the military pulls out and stops buying my nails and buckles, I'll still have the farm to support my family. The other big problem with towns is competition when trading, because the last time I was at the market, I wasn't the only blacksmith there. We're all being brought to the same place, so people start undercutting prices and selling rubbish tools to make a cheaper profit. Here, I'm the only man that people can come to, because I'm the only one with the know-how to turn rocks into useful metals. Also, I'm not prepared to accept the new gods of the Romans. They're a totally different people, and I don't like what they're doing to my gods either, renaming them and such. So, and I don't want my children to forget the old ways either. So for me, it's this hut or the grave.
Wow, that's some quite strong views you've got there. Well, thank you for your time, Nathalie. So I can tell you're quite busy, and hopefully we'll catch up again with you soon in the future. Have a nice day.
During the Roman occupation, hill forts were abandoned in favour of newly developing towns. The old hilltop strongholds of regional chieftains were either too remote to compete economically or were forcibly dismantled by the Roman army. The shift would have been symbolic to the Romans and their newly conquered British subjects. The chieftains in their heavily defended forts no longer held sway. It was the Romans in their new trade and administration-focused towns who now controlled day-to-day life.
Agricola encouraged individual Britons and assisted communities to build temples, forums and houses, praising those who were keen to do this and criticising those who were dilatory. Thus, the competition for public recognition made compulsion redundant.
For example, in Hampshire, the Belgae's old tribal area paid its taxes and got its laws from the Roman capital at Winchester, then to Belgarum. Each of the civitas capitals centred upon a basilica. The basilica was the equivalent to a modern-day council building and courthouse rolled into one. Within this, you would find the career politicians of the Roman Empire, the magistrates. The main functions of the basilica were to collect tax, dispense law, and host markets. Farmers, tradesmen, miners, and merchants of all kinds would have sold their wares within the walls of the basilica. It provided a solid, dry place to host a market all year round, which there had not been prior to the Roman occupation. Early houses in Winchester were rectangular and wooden, with separate rooms, each with their own specific function. This contrasts the round huts we find the Britons living in pre-invasion. As towns such as Winchester and Silchester became more established, and the townspeople began to draw in significant wealth from trade with the Roman Empire, they began to build larger stone townhouses. Within these townhouses, we see the beginnings of Roman interior design, such as mosaics and wall paintings, becoming more frequent as we move beyond the invasion era. Spreading between these settlements were the roads built by the military in the initial invasion phase. But following on from the invasion, even more roads were constructed to bring Britain's abundant resources within the grip of the empire. Now we will visit another Roman town, rejoining Natalinus 20 years after we last saw him. This time he's at Silchester, the civitas capital of the Atrebati tribe.
Hello, and here I am, some 20 years later, with Natalinus, who has just received a contract to repair the amphitheatre in Roman Silchester. Hello, Natalinus. When we last spoke, you were adamant about not moving into towns. So, what's changed?
Well, I specialised. I don't have to deal with competition anymore. A few Romans wanted to build a big house and barn next to my old farm, and they had me make all of the nails and fixtures as well as a few metal ploughs for them. So after that I had enough money to buy a forge and move here to Silchester, and everyone around comes to me for their tools now.
But since we've moved, my sons decided they didn't want to keep on dealing with an old trout like me going on about the old ways. So my eldest has joined the first cohort of Britons, and he's off out in the Empire somewhere now. As an auxiliary, he sends most of his wages home to us to save for him for when he comes back. And when he does, he can proudly say he's earned his Roman citizenship.
A real turnaround in our family's fortunes, I can tell you.
Yeah, so it sounds like your family are doing quite well through the changes. But one last bit, you mentioned your own tribe. How are they dealing with this new Roman system?
Well, most of them have been integrated like I have, though there are still a few holdouts. My old neighbour still lives in a round hut out in the sticks because he can't afford to move to the city. But being of the tribe doesn't really mean what it used to for us anymore. That's now just an area of land that gets taxed by the Romans. My old neighbours don't care what tribe I'm from, and I don't care what tribe they're from. We're all just working to be Romans. Here in Silchester, my neighbour on one side is from northern Gaul. He's a Parisi, and on the other side I have a Batavian ex-soldier. I don't care who or what they are as long as they pay up.
Well, that's good. Sounds like you're adapting quite well to this, to being in a new Roman town. But how are you actually adapting to day-to-day life, apart from the tribal matters?
Being in a town's great. I don't have to worry about food anymore or the harvest because it's all just on sale in the market. I'm also thinking of adding a second floor to my house. I've helped a few others around here do it, and I think I could do it on my own with a few extra pairs of hands, without too much planning. I think when my son comes back, I'd also like to add some walls, some brick walls, and with that newfangled Roman cement as well, and maybe even an underfloor hypercourse so we can have heating under the floors to keep us warm through the winter. They're also building a bathhouse in the town, and the supply of fresh clean water is staggering. It's not like my old farm where there was always a chance someone's cattle had been wallowing in the drinking water.
So how do you think things will change in the future? Do you think Roman Britain will continue to develop?
Well, since Boudicca's revolt, we haven't had too many tribal rebellions, and that happened in my father's time. There are still some holdouts in the north and in Wales that like to cause trouble, but for us down here it's not too much of a problem. This area is peaceful and civilised. Personally, I'd like to see more roads, more development, and I'd like more people to sell to. I want to make enough money so that my children and grandchildren never have to go back to living on a farm like I did. And with my son, a Roman citizen, who knows the possibilities.
Well, it sounds like your family have done very well in the new Roman Britain. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you for your time once again, Natalinus. Bye-bye.
The modern region of Hampshire was now peaceful and under the golden age of Roman rule. But what did it mean to be a Roman in Hampshire? A key source for the process of Romanisation is Tacitus's Agricola. The text gives a contemporary, second-hand account of who was ruling during Natalinus' life and why he was able to adapt so rapidly to a Roman way of life. One section of Tacitus' Agricola has always hung in the minds of scholars as to whether Roman rule was draconic, benevolent, or a sinister mix of both.
So the population was gradually led into the demoralising temptations of arcades, baths and sumptuous banquets. The unsuspecting Britons spoke of such novelties as civilization, when in fact they were only a feature of their enslavement.
But was this just Tacitus waxing romantic over the death of his idea of a noble savage to Roman decadence? What did people living in Hampshire think of their new sumptuous banquets and arcades? Accounts of individuals' lives from this era are rare and fragmentary, so scholars are forced to rely on the archaeological evidence to answer this question. As we saw earlier with Natalinus' son, many Britons chose the difficult and often dangerous path to Roman citizenship. By completing 25 years of military service as auxiliaries, non-Roman citizens could achieve citizenship. Although on rare occasions, citizenship was awarded early for bravery. Natalinus' son would have witnessed this in AD 106 during the Second Dacian War.
The Emperor, Caesar, Trajan, father of his country, has granted Roman citizenship before the completion of their service to the infantry and cavalry serving in the first cohort of Britons, 1,000 strong, Trajan's own, for loyal and true service in the Dacian campaign.
Natalinus' son would have returned home with his diploma to the still developing town of Silchester, having gained all the advantages of citizenship. These included legal recognition, right to own property, and the right to vote and stand for office in his civitas. Unlike many of Natalinus' neighbours, who would have still been non-citizens, the Peregrini. However, the Romans brought more than legal practice. Traditional British religion was altered by the Romans. Pagan gods that had existed pre-occupation were co-opted into the Roman pantheon, all seen as British incarnations of Roman deities. A famous example of this is Sulis Minerva, goddess of the hot springs in Bath. Two examples from Hampshire are known, one from the Roman town of Clausentum, near modern-day Southampton, where an excavation revealed an altar.
To the goddess Ancasta, Geminus Manilius willingly and deservedly fulfills his vow.
Ancasta was a British goddess, possibly of the river or sea, whose name was now the target of Roman worship. Further east on Henning Island, an old Iron Age temple of standing timbers in a circle was developed by the Romans into a larger complex. The Iron Age British influence is clear from the rare situation of a traditional Brythonic circular temple being rebuilt in masonry and surrounded by a Roman square colonnade. This represents Roman and British cultures melding rather than violently colliding. Were the Britons' gods borrowed or stolen by the Romans? Was the temple an upgrade or an insult to tradition? It can be assumed that local reactions were varied by the fact that these temples were maintained and accepted. The final sign of the Britons' acceptance of Roman culture as their own was the development of country estates centering on large opulent houses in a Roman style. In the early 20th century, it was believed that the majority of these estates were the homes of military veterans, who were allotted the land as part of their retirement. However, from intensive excavation, it is now understood that many of these homes were built by successful Romano-Britons, whose gamble in aligning themselves with Roman cultural ideals had paid off. This was, however, a slow process, as the Hampshire area shows. Villas were still a rare sight in AD 100. More were built by AD 200. But from AD 300 onwards, Hampshire saw an explosion in the amount of villas being built, especially in scale, decoration and architecture, as multiple stories and multiple wings became more commonplace. Rockbourne Villa, which we've already visited, began as a small wooden house in the years soon after the invasion. In the following centuries, as the owners and their businesses flourished, the house itself was rebuilt as a corridor villa, which then had an eastern wing attached. Barns were built to keep livestock and corn dryers to feed the people as the villa became the centre of a community. In each step of construction, a new bathhouse was added as the ultimate expression of Roman civilization and wealth. After 260 years, the people of Britain had gained enough wealth from trade with the empire that their country lands could now become grand estates. However, the peace was not to last. As soon as many of these villas were completed, the empire began to show its weakness. In AD 235, the crisis of the first century began with the murder of Emperor Severus Alexander. In the following 50 years, civil war tore the heart out of the empire. 26 emperors and multiple claimants fought for the imperial throne in rapid succession. With Rome's generals distracted, the frontiers were weakened and barbarian tribes cut swathes of destruction deep into the heart of the empire. Due to this turmoil, the imperial economy started to show signs of collapse, and the cities became increasingly unsafe. Britain was repeatedly cut off from imperial rule, and local leadership was increasingly sought. The empire was divided in two, and then further as component provinces rebelled. There was a growing desire to move away from centralised power. This desire was mirrored in civil society as the population began to abandon the towns in favour of newly built villas in the countryside. In this time, we will now meet the descendants of Natalinus, 175 years later, who have moved into one such villa. The villa at Thruxton has been excavated by modern archaeologists, where a mosaic was found inscribed with the name of Quintus Natilius Natalinus, who we assume either worked with or was one of the Bodini, a local group of families who supported the villa. And now we will join Will, who is with Quintus at the villa in AD 285.
And so here we are with Natalinus' descendant Quintus. He's made this very impressive Roman villa near modern-day Thruxton, close to Silchester, where we met his ancestor about 200 years ago. So Quintus, when did your family move out here?
Oh, about 5 years ago, actually. My father owned this land, and we had only a couple of enclosures on it then, though, for livestock, which wasn't very developed. But since then, we've been able to make more of a profit out of it, and obviously, as you said, build this villa.
really is a lovely villa. You've got mosaics, paintings, lovely furniture, but wasn't your town life just as good? What was wrong with the towns? Why did you move out?
Oh, firstly, there was the maintenance issues. Mainly as the emperors have been fighting wars with themselves and with the barbarians crossing the borders. It's meant that there's been less and less money to keep the province's basilicas running, and obviously that's where we have our market. It's falling apart in Silchester, so therefore it's not safe. So therefore we're forced to hold our markets outside of the town walls, and therefore we're not selling as much goods to people. Although the final straw was definitely the plagues when I was a boy, which especially has killed many people, and especially in Silchester because we were all sharing one source of water, which wasn't very safe.
Yeah, of course. Sounds like a horrible situation. It must have affected everything, really. Your livelihood, the economy, the people. How did you get through it?
Well, fortunately for some of us, we were able to inherit quite a lot of wealth. As obviously there was more money between less people, so we were able to move out and build these estates and so on. But at the same time, the actual problem with the economy has been poor coinage. So, for example, there's less and less silver and gold in our main denominations of money. So, that's meant that people are less happy to make big deals with them because we're not sure of the value of these coins. So therefore, for my metalwork, I was getting paid in terms of wheat and pottery by many people. However, my suppliers, the miners mining metal up in Mendips, weren't happy about that. So therefore, I had to think about another business plan. But so therefore, we switched to farming in the end. In particular out here, because people will always want to eat in this economy, but they won't always need or be able to afford my metal goods.
Of course, and now that you're a farmer, how do you manage your estate?
Oh, there's a few families around here that all go under the name of the Bedini. They run several farms, they send me their yields each harvest, and I sell those in the nearby markets as and when I can in Silchester and Winchester. At the same time, there's also a villa nearby that runs a water mill that I send my finer quality wheat to. And then they mill that into a very fine quality flour that we then sell to the very well off. So that makes a tiny profit. However, not such a successful venture as we were hoping to grow vines out on the southern slopes, start a vineyard. But winters have been too long and the summer's too cold, and we've lost quite a few harvests from that. So we've had to buy in our wine and vinegar from Gaul instead, which is very expensive.
Of course. So trade with the empire remains, but what's the political situation like?
Oh, it's been utter chaos. But recently we've had 5 years of, 5 short years of peace during Aurelian's reign, because he's been able to hold it together. But before him, we were getting a new emperor every other year. A new man would become general of an army, and he'd use that army to take power. It just wasn't very stable. So therefore, that's meant that we've had to fortify our towns so that people can feel safe, because we're not sure what's happening. But there's a sort of a final step, that's a bit of an advantage, because we've been able to get tax breaks. Because obviously they need to keep the provinces loyal, so it's not been too bad here.
Very nice. So yes, with all this military upheaval, how has this affected Hampshire as a province?
Well, the garrison has been stripped clean. Stripped clean power. So, we've got very little left here to protect us. They're building forts further and further south, to protect against the raids from the Germanians. But it's not enough. They've protected as far as Kent at the moment, ports there, but we need something here. At the same time, the towns have got ramparts, but London has a huge stone wall to protect it, and I think we need something more along those lines. So
you've moved out to the countryside. Are you going to stay here? What's your plans long term?
I expect I shall stay, do my best to keep my family out of the troubles of the empire at the moment, and just hopefully, once things have remained peaceful for a little while, restart blacksmithing forge and make more money that way.
It's a lovely life you have out here. I'm sure many will join you. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy man. You've got a lot to do. We'll say goodbye for now and catch up with you soon.
Thank you.
Hampshire had been spared the worst of the 3rd century's upheaval, but this uneasy peace was finally shattered in AD 286. A recently appointed and extremely successful military commander, Carausius, was accused by the emperor of using his orders to deal with piracy for his own personal gain.
Eutropius, Though many barbarians were frequently intercepted, their booty was not returned to the provincials in its entirety, nor was it sent to the emperors. As a result, the suspicion arose that Carausius was deliberately letting the barbarians in so as to catch them as they passed through with their booty, and in this way enrich himself.
As a result of this assumed corruption, the Emperor Maximian ordered Carausius' arrest. Carausius was warned, however, and declared himself Caesar of Britain and Northern Gaul, with his loyal army and navy to defend his new territory. Carausius ruled over his new territories for nearly a decade. He built new fortifications, took on civil construction projects, and even operated his own propaganda machine through the coinage he minted.
Renovat Romano, restorer of Britain.
Genius Britanniae, spirit of Britain.
Expectate veni, come, long-awaited one.
Redeunt Saturnia regna, iam nova progenis caelo demititur alto. The golden ages are back. Now a new generation is let down from the heavens above.
After a failed invasion attempt by the Emperor Maximian, which was put down to bad weather.
The crime so long unpunished had fanned the insolence of those reckless men to boast that the roughness of the sea, which by constraint of fate delayed your victory, Caesar, for fear of them the war had been abandoned in despair, so they believed, not just postponed by act of policy.
A set of coins was released depicting Carausius as an equal third member of the now divided Roman Empire.
Carausius a fratres sui, Carausius and his brothers.
However, before Carausius could see his new fortifications in use, he was assassinated in AD 239 by his second-in-command, Electus. Electus then assumed control of Britain. His reign was short-lived, as by AD 296 the preparations for the recapture of Britain were complete. Constantius finally launched his invasion to remove Electus from power and bring Britain back under the authority of the Western Empire. Part of this invasion force landed in the Solent, near modern-day Southampton.
At that very moment, such mist swirled over the surface of the sea that the enemy fleet on station on the Isle of Wight as lookout and ambush was bypassed and the enemy left in total ignorance and thus unable to delay our attack, still less resist it. The army, invincible under your leadership, Caesar, set fire to all its ships the moment it set foot upon the coast of Britain. Yet, in fleeing, he fell into the hands of your men, and defeated by you, he was overwhelmed by your armies. Finally, in terror, looking for you behind him, crazed like some madman, he so hastened to his death that he neither deployed his line of battle nor arranged the forces that trailed after him. He rushed to the attack with only those old instigators of the plot and the divisions of foreign mercenaries.
The battle is thought to have taken place near Silchester, and Electus was defeated. Subsequently, Constantius marched on London and re-established Roman rule. This watershed moment marks a significant change for Roman Hampshire, as it moves away from being a peaceful core territory of Britain to once more being a frontline province. We will now rejoin Will at Porchester Castle, where he will be once more meeting Quintus Natalinus.
So here we are at Porchester with Quintus, but he's a legionary now. So Quintus, how have the last 20 years been for you?
I want to spend much of the last 20 years during the reign of Carausius on my farm, which was very peaceful because more profitable, because Carausius, to keep us all loyal, was giving us some very welcome tax breaks. We were also able to restart the blacksmithing business because he needed to build a much stronger army and navy, so we were able to start supplying that and obviously defend against the empire proper. However, at the same time, with the end of trade to the empire, it meant that we had grain rotting in our stores because we were no longer able to sell that down the Rhine to Gaul and Germania.
But here you are in armour. What made you leave your villa?
Well, the end of the British emperors was not favourable for many of us. It caused lots of changes because they started Carausius did a lot of things right. The Electus started to hire barbarians and pay them off so they wouldn't raid us. Further to that, they started settling in Britain, and that wasn't favourable with many of the locals. So we, especially as many of us predicted towards the end, as soon as Electus was killed and the cash obviously was going to stop flowing, his defeat, not but 20 miles away from where I lived, they turned rogue and started raiding and pillaging their way through settlements and villas on the way north to London. I realised I could have just as easily been my family that was killed, so I decided I had to do something about that.
So would you say the British Emperor's idea of home rule sort of led to the end of a peaceful life for you?
I would say the British Emperor's got quite a lot right. For example, building this fort, Carausius ensured that, and my family has felt a lot safer since then, also my business. However, his second in command obviously got a lot wrong, for example, hiring barbarians to fight his wars for him. Although Constantius solved that problem, so he's a leader I can believe in his lineage.
So I've heard you on the defensive a lot, just filling in holes in the frontiers. We spoke to some earlier legionaries. How do you think the role of the military has changed in the last 250 years?
Well, obviously we fought north of the walls with Constantius. I've been north fighting with Scotti and the Picts to stop the raiding up there, and we've come back south now to fight the Saxons, and we've been successful thus far. However, obviously I can see what you mean, that the economy of the Empire is not that strong at the moment, and obviously the legionaries of the Golden Age were able to equip themselves far more heavily. The army is a lot bigger as well now to react to the fact that we've got to cover a larger front line, so the equipment is spread thin. However, we are reacting to the enemy's tactics as well, because they come through in small raiding parties, and it would take time for a large military to react to that. So we've got to spread ourselves thinner. But we're more successful as time goes on.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Quintus. You've been very helpful, and good luck in your military career. Quintus, like many of his Romano-British comrades, would have joined Constantine the Great 10 years later when he brought great changes to the Roman Empire. After being declared emperor in York, he campaigned south to Rome and reunited the two halves of the Roman Empire. Suddenly, Hampshire's military was under the command of counts, or commes in Latin, and civil administration under rectors and vicars. Furthermore, landowners formed the eques class, equivalent in status and role to the knights of the Middle Ages. Finally, Constantine's most far-reaching decision was made when he converted to Christianity. This decision categorically changed the future of Europe and the world in legitimising this growing religion in the eyes of the Roman people. Moreover, it began the end of 300 years of religious competition for primacy.
People lived in these walls fought for the Roman way of life, whereas 400 years earlier, their ancestors had fought to oppose it. But all of the changes in advance the Romans brought to Hampshire, with the collapse of the complex economy that formed and supported villas and towns, events came full circle. Within 100 years of the Roman withdrawal, towns like such as Silchester were collapsing. Inhabitants of Britain returned to thatched huts and small tribal communities, and it'd be another 3 centuries before these warring communities could unite anything similar to what the Romans had been before.